Bruce Shelley, welcome to the Game Informer Show, sir.
Thank you.
It's a real honor to have you. Thank you for at the last second agreeing to Skype in and get Skype working for us.
You're welcome. I'm not the most technical guy in the world, but
I find that hard to believe.
Well, I don't code. I don't write code. You know, I started making games and they're paper and board games, and I transitioned to computer games, but I was not a coder. There was very few coders around in the 70s when I got started.
Have you learned to love computers, or is it a constant battle of like, come on, programmers, just try and get this vision from pen and paper down?
No, I'm pretty excited about computers. I can't imagine life without a computer and without the internet. One of my brothers is a builder, and he's very tough on the internet. And he says, "Well, Bruce, when you say you can't live without it, I guess I got to get it myself." But I couldn't live without it.
Good. So, just in general, you go so far back in the industry, working with Sid Meier back at Microprose and everything. What do you see as the role of those kind of the seasoned masterclass game designers like yourself? What is their role in the industry today? What do you think is your mission?
I never thought of it, but I think wherever I've been the oldest employee by 20 years, and I think it's to pass on. Just think about the fundamentals of design and of game development, what we're doing, and how do we make the magic happen a second time. When you make a great game, we got in the habit of disassembling it and trying to figure out what went right, and then try to learn from that process. So I've been involved with several startups, and I think I've been able to pass on some fundamental principles about developing games that have stood well over the test of time.
It's interesting you say making it happen a second time. So, I mean, the first time just lightning strikes, and then a lot of effort is put into analyzing why did that lightning strike?
I guess there's some credence to the idea of lightning, but we did games. When I started making paper games and board games, we basically built prototypes and played with them, and it wasn't like an engineering problem. You started with a piece of paper and a map, and you started putting parts on it, and you started pushing people around and writing down rules on a yellow pad, and it was a prototyping process, and we designed by playing. Now, as far as I know, that's still how many great games are built. So that we're learning that in paper days. It carried over very well to computer days because that's how Sid Meier built games. And I went to work with him at Microprose. That's how he made his games. He wasn't using paper and boards. He was doing computer stuff, and it was all prototyping. He had half a dozen prototypes on his computer at any one time. And he was always noodling with them and playing a little bit, and we would change it every day. And he was not one for writing down anything. There was no documentation. There was no design notes or design documents. And when we started Ensemble Studios, I was one of the few people who had any experience building games, but most of the guys had built software of some kind. So I pushed the idea that let's prototype as fast as we can and then play it every day and see how it comes together. I've seen it done elsewhere. I spent some time working in Germany, and they basically had their design done before they started programming, and they were loath to change the design after they started building it. They were building it to a design specification, and I felt really uncomfortable with that because what if you find something's not playable, it's not working right? Our process was that we were changing it all the time on a daily basis, and it came together well if we relied on our instincts as game players to tell us when we were doing something right or wrong. Then the game would come together. I felt confident it would come together well. That's how Sid Meier built games. That's how Ensemble Studios built games. I believe that's how Blizzard builds games. I believe it's how Brian Reynolds builds games. So some of us we all come from the same school, the Sid Meier School of Design, you could say. But I think that works. I'm not so sure that this engineering process works where the design is done up front.
Yeah, it's nice to hear that you look up to Sid Meier in some ways. Has he been a big teacher? A lot of guidance for him throughout the years?
Actually, not really. I mean, I worked with him intensely for 3 years.
Yeah.
I was his assistant, his producer, his designer, his writer, his everything that he didn't want to do. That was my job. And but we would have long conversations. We would sit around and chat about what we were doing, and he was the first person I ever met who actually tried to dissemble what we were doing and think about what was happening when somebody was being entertained or not entertained, and how do we build that into our process. He gave the first speech I ever heard about game development, and I recorded it, and I remembered a lot of the things he said. I've carried him with me forever, and we did work intensely. But he's a very private guy. When I left, I mean, we're certainly in touch. We went on a cruise together one time with our wives, and we've spoken together at conferences and stuff, and we chat. But it's not like, I mean, I learned what I learned from him, and then I moved on and I started working with a whole new group of people, and we started learning from each other. It wasn't like I called him up for questions. I mean, we just went off on our own, and based on what we all knew from our own experiences, we built our own next group of games.
Yeah. Well, talking about prototyping a little bit, in Big Gamescom video recently, they were talking about the history of Age of Empires, and you had a wonderful segment throughout that video, and you were talking about before Age of Empires 1, Ensemble, you guys were working on some sort of survival game on an island? What was
Well,
this?
that was just we needed something. We needed something to work on. We're talking about 5 or 6 people, employees, and we started building. We needed an idea for a game, obviously, and the one idea we kicked around several, and the one that I remember was this concept of like the lost experience. Being marooned on an island with a handful of people, and then they had to it was cool. You had to explore the island, you had to gather materials. There were other people there all of a sudden that you had to compete with or fight with, and they had a lot of elements that sounded like they'd be interesting. And then we came up, well, I think it was Tim Dean, one of my colleagues, who said, you got to play these games. And then he was pointing us to Warcraft and Command and Conquer.
Yeah.
He says, this is really cool. You got to play these. And when we started playing those, it might have been Tim's idea. I don't remember now who, but somebody said, why don't we build a historical game like these and tie it into the stuff you'd done with Civilization, these historical civilizations. And that was the vision statement for Age of Empires 1.
It seems so simple just to be like, yeah, Civilization meets Warcraft. Let's go. Was it that easy of a pitch internally?
It was pretty easy internally. And it's funny because you say that obvious. And I remember doing the first PR tour in San Francisco when the game was getting close to launch, and I met a journalist in San Francisco named Elliot Chin, and he says, "This is so obvious. Why didn't anybody else come up with this?" And we've been working over a couple of years, and no one else. Because I remember specifically there were 50 some real time strategy games in development while we were building Age 1. I think Computer Gaming World was a popular magazine at the time, and they reported on these 50 some games. And every one of them was either science fiction or fantasy, following in the footsteps of either Warcraft or Command and Conquer. We were the only ones who had decided to do something in a historic theme, and it turned out to be a very winning choice.
Yeah, for sure. So when you look back on that game's development, what moments stand out to you? What are the most pivotal moments in Age of Empires 1's development?
Well, I think a critical moment was the decision to make the game, the vision of it. It was obvious. That was very important because then we had a winning concept. We had to build it. A second big step for me was, I think I remember, was we sat down one day at a chalkboard, a whiteboard, and drew up all the things that worked in Warcraft and Command and Conquer, what they were doing really well. And that was kind of like the minimum requirement we had to do. If we're going to compete with these guys, we got to be as good as they are at this stuff.
Yeah.
And then we made another list over here, which what are they not doing? And that's our opportunity. And the historic theme was one of those things. I remember randomly generated maps was something I liked from Civilization. We've done that. Multiple victory conditions. There was a list of things. A different look at the graphics, a realistic look at the graphics. We made a list of stuff we would do differently, and I think that was an incredible point for me because I carry that idea forward in the future. You have to differentiate your game at a very high level with the competition. People got to look at it right away and say, "Well, that's not something I've played before. That's different." And then when they actually play it, it's got to be innovative. There's got to be something going on there they hadn't done before to hold their interest again. So you get them with the differentiation and you hold them with the innovation. And then you can borrow a lot. There's a lot of certainly some of the principles carry forward from game to game, but you have to be different and you have to innovate in order to succeed.
Was it a tough game to develop? I mean, I know you're still in the whiteboard phase, but it sounds again so remarkably simple. Like, well, they did this, we'll do this, and delivered.
Yes, it was hard. We had to do a lot of stuff from scratch. The people had never built games, and they were software engineers and artists. We were lucky. We found some really great artists out of the Art Studio Dallas that could really model well and animate. We had some terrific engineers who could code. Angelo Loudon was the lead engineer, and he built the engine. And it was a struggle. Tony Goodman did a great job of finding people as we needed them. We needed a guy to do this. We needed a guy for graphics. We needed a guy for communication engineering, and he was very good at finding the right person to put in that slot. So even as a small team, everybody was pretty competent at their skill base, and they all had an interest in games. So I mean, I forgot there was another great moment was when we was multiplayer for the first time, because we every day we played a little Warcraft or a little Command and Conquer as we worked on it, and then we got to the point where our prototype was playable, and that was a huge day. We were all up and down the halls in our office building, and we're playing against each other in like an 8-player game, and it was just like a cheer. It was like now we play Age every day until it's done, and that was and I know and then years later I would say whenever we got to that point in every next succeeding game, I knew we were guaranteed to be good because our process would work.
Yeah. And so you were funded fully by Microsoft at that point, or how does the involvement with Microsoft intertangle with this?
We were funded by Tony Goodman's other company. Tony Goodman, the founder, he and his partner John Booscott, and he had 2 other partners. They had an Ensemble Corporation, which was software for banks and databases and stuff, and they funded the start of Ensemble. And Angelo Loudon came over, and Tony came over from the other corporation, and some other people came over eventually as well. And they funded us for a long time. And when we got to a point where we had a playable prototype, we started talking to publishers. I know we made a road trip across the country one time. We showed the game to Hasbro Interactive, and we flew across country to Microsoft. Microsoft had sent some people to Dallas to look at some other games, and Tony Goodman had been in contact with them, I think with Stuart Mulder, and Stuart told his guys, Ed Ventura is the one I remember specifically, he says, drop over to this office and see what they've got, because they pinged us somewhere. And Microsoft, you have to remember, was really new in the games at that time. They hadn't had any big success.
Yeah.
So they came over our studio. They asked for an hour of our time, and they stayed for 4 hours. And they asked if we could come to Seattle and show it, or Redmond, and show it to more people up there. And that's when we made our road trip. We showed it to a couple other publishers as well. But we were inclined to work with Microsoft if we could. I mean, they're the largest publisher in the world, software publisher in the world. Lots, empty, deep pockets. We thought that if we could possibly work with them, that's who we wanted to work with. And they turned out to be the most proactive about trying to sign the game. The people like Stuart Mulder specifically, I'd met him years earlier, and I think there was a comfort level with him and us, and they pursued it. So they started funding the game at that point.
Was it a thrill for you? I mean, are you interacting with Bill Gates at this process? Are you starstruck on a tech level by the whole thing?
Well, it was thrilling to know that you were working with Microsoft, absolutely. And but there was a struggle because they had their own rules about software development, and they were worried about costs a little bit, and eventually I think what happened, they came around to the idea that this was a chance to hit a home run, and they asked us to do like an Asian concepts, because they wanted to sell the game in Asia, which is something we had not planned. And so they had some requests from us, and we took longer than they would have liked probably, but I think they ultimately decided that this game had a chance to be a home run for them, and they were going to invest in it, and they were going to stick with it, and it paid off for everybody.
Yeah, I think at some point you mentioned that Bill Gates wanted to make it more educational, or he saw the potential on an education basis with Age of Empires 1?
That was a couple years later when we had Age 2, and there was a Microsoft internal presentation, like 10 teams that were building software for Microsoft were set up in stations in a big room, and Bill came in with his advisors, and they walked around the room, looked at every station, and he stopped at ours and spoke to Tony and I. We were showing him what was going to become Age of Empires 2. And he said, they told us you have 10 minutes, but if he wants to talk longer, you talk to him as long as he asks questions, you keep talking, but you can only talk for 10 minutes unless he asks questions. And he spoke with us much longer than 10 minutes. And one of the comments was, there's so much going on here. It should just be an educational product. And that's when I said, well, I don't think so. I think it won't go anywhere unless we entertain people first. And then I think there's a lot of education that could be learned, but we got to entertain people first.
Yeah, educational aspect is a nice runoff. Yeah, people get to learn about the history, and even with Age of Mythology, then learning about mythology, there's a nice side product to the whole thing.
Yeah, I think we've gotten letters over the years about people who said, my son was an indifferent student, then he started playing Age of Empires. Now he's in the library and he's reading about the different races, the cultures, the civilizations, and we can't believe a piece of software has done this. And another friend of mine told me about how his daughter got into playing Age, and she's very young, 6 years old, and she says she learned how to use the computer playing your game, and now she's teaching me how to use a computer. So all that kind of input, that that Microsoft, and we loved hearing that. I mean, this is Microsoft wants to make software, and empowerment, and our game is doing that. It's exactly what they were looking for in software.
Yeah. So with Age of Empires 1, when you wrapped it up, uh, how did you feel about it overall? Do you feel like it competed or surpassed the competition, or what was the consensus upon release from you
I think
guys?
we were very pleased with it. We thought we had done something really great. Now the desperation was when we started. From where I came from, we had to sell 100,000 copies. I thought to be successful. By the time we finished, I think we had to sell over 400,000 copies because
Oh
we'd spent enough
God.
money building it and it took so much time. So it was just, we were worried. And then, of course, we sold that number quickly. And we actually, I think, I could be wrong about this, but I think Microsoft ran out of stock and the end of before the Christmas season was over, and they had to rush to make more and get them out there. So
Oh God.
it was a hit right away, and we were really ecstatic. I remember a journalist in Great Britain told me when I was over there later. He says, I saw the screenshot of that game and knew it'd be a success. So that was great, but we had to deliver on that promise of that screenshot. And I think we did.
What is the screenshot? What do you think? What did he see in that potential with just the basic idea of, I don't know, here's a hut in the sand?
Well, what he saw was a digital world that looked inviting. There's a comment that I made years ago that I stick with. It's the sun always is shining in Age of Empires. It was inviting. It was a world you wanted to explore. There was creatures running around, animals, deer running around. There was tigers, and you had to play in this real world. And it was in. I think the word I keep using is inviting. You wanted to know more about the world this was. It wasn't a stark, dystopian world of the future, and it was looked like a real place. And the characters you saw, the guys with a bow, a guy on a horse, a guy with an axe. Okay, I understand it. I get that. That I know what those people are going to do. You see a man in a full metal uniform deep in space. You're not quite sure what his capabilities are, but an archer, you got a good idea.
Yeah. I mean, was that on your big whiteboard in the beginning as a differentiator? Is like we want it to be friendly?
I don't think so. I think Tony brought that up. Tony was our de facto art director early on, and he really went for this realistic look. And we had the idea of the ambient life. You could hunt the deer, and if you weren't careful, the tigers would eat your deer. You wanted to get the tiger. I think we got rid of tigers because people they hated to lose their deer. But elephants running around, you wanted to kill an elephant. It was a huge food source. I mean,
Yeah.
I think the whole idea of the look and that was from I think Tony was. I don't remember it on our chalkboard. I could have been. I don't remember it.
Maybe it's just I wasn't as competitive in multiplayer as I should have been with Ensemble's games. But looking back at your entire run there, I just think there's kind of like a softness to the competition that I absolutely love. And maybe it's also just the rise of streaming and people being a little more analytical when it comes to competition with RTSs. But it just feels soft and friendly, and that it's not just numbers. And I love, Blizzard's game. I love StarCraft. But every time I play StarCraft, I feel like there's a ticking clock. I need to do this, then this, then this, then this. And if I miss that window, it's all gone. Do you feel that? Was that part of the expression of the design within Ensemble, is to make everything softer, looser, more organic, and less about a analytical beat by beat by beat competition basis?
I don't remember setting out to do that. I think what we did, I think, was provide both that type of experience and many different experiences. So you could play it as a soft game. You could play the map. I hear from people who played the scenarios over and over again. They found them entertaining. They could play solitaire against a computer and set the difficulty level to something that was manageable for them.
Yeah.
They could build their own map and build their own maps and build their own scenarios. And if you wanted to, you could play an intense multiplayer game where you had to be on beat every second. So I think we gave people lots of different experience. I used to say I wanted the smartest 15-year-old kid in junior high to love our game at an intense multiplayer level and tell all its friends, this is the best game I'm playing. Now, most of those kids could not compete with this really whiz kid, but they could buy that game and find a way to really enjoy it themselves. And so I think we made a lot of different experiences inside the box, and that worked for us.
What do you see as the RTS sweet spot, especially when it comes to multiplayer? When you look at Ensemble's work, do you see it as holding up to, do you want people to be measuring APMs and getting down to the millisecond here?
Well, I was never my goal. I mean, I'm a casual player. I mean, I could not compete with the best players in our company by any means. Part of that was because as a designer, one of the designers, you're always trying to break the game and try something, to see if there's something other way to do it. There's other people who are optimizing their play, and then there's people who are trying to do something crazy. I was usually one of the crazy people, and I never. It's like typing 100 words a minute and typing 20 words a minute. I was a 20 or 30 word typer. The best players were typing 100 words a minute and never missed anything. And we eventually hired those people to work on H2 to make it a better game for those reasons. We had some great test team for H2, and half those guys have gone on to the game industry. At least I think they were all guys at the time.
Yeah.
So.
That's wild. I mean, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around how you can design a game that can be so friendly, but then also, do you feel like it holds up to those levels and maybe H2 specifically for the most intense possible competition?
I believe so, because we had a great test team that helped us build that type of game. And we had the other kinds. We had already knew how to make a more casual game with the soft maps. Like we had to make maps that were, even though they were sort of randomly generated, but they had to be equally balanced.
Yeah.
Because we had to have the resources in the same distance and the same kind of things. Because people would say, "Hey, that elephant was too far away. I lost. As soon as I saw it, I quit. I saw it was too far away. I had to quit." Like I had a friend at Blizzard who told me he got a letter from a fellow who told him if he would move this object 1 pixel to the south, he would never lose. But because of where it was, he occasionally lost. So I wasn't really too enthusiastic about making a game that had that situation in it. But our testers, our balance testers, made sure that we had a game that was could be intensely competitive at a certain level. But we also had these other experiences which were friendly to a larger audience, and that's why I think our game did well all across the world. I mean, some games do well in Asia, some do well in Europe, some do well in America. But our games did well everywhere, in every country, in every style of play.
Did you have much communication with Blizzard or Westwood back in the day? Did you guys talk to each other upon the game's release?
No, I don't remember that. I mean, it turns out over the years people go to work for different companies. We hired people from Blizzard, they hired people from us, and we got some insight in how it was done. And then you go in conferences, you run into people from other companies, and you talk to them about their product. I mean, I went to work for Zynga for a while, and I was working with a team in Los Angeles as a consultant, and they had all been on Command and Conquer. And one of their guys had, "I got to talk to you. Let's sit down for a while." And we sat down in a room, and he wanted to assemble how we had made our games. And he says, "Because you guys were the competition, we were always looking at what you were doing." And he went, "How did you do it? He wanted to know about our processes and stuff like that. So this happened years afterwards. But we were always aware of what the other companies were doing. We tried to look at their screenshots and to play their games for sure.
Well, speaking of screenshots, when you mentioned Age of Empires 2, I had this flashback. It must have been included in Rise of Rome, Age of Empires expansion, but you had screenshots of Age of Empires 2 included in that. And I remember upon Age of Empires 2's release, it just looked nothing like those original screenshots. Do you remember that? Do you remember where those came from?
No, I don't. That's a good. I don't remember that at all. But I know we went through a lot of iteration. I mean, H2 was supposed to be a fast, follow up maybe within a year, and we got into making it, and we just got so excited about the possibilities that we came to Microsoft and we proposed, let's take another year to work on H2, and in the interim we can build an expansion pack for H1, which was the genesis for the Rise of Rome.
Yeah,
Sandy Peterson was in charge of that from the design, and we got that out in a year, and it turned out to be a really smart decision because Rise of Rome sold really well, and it kept H1 alive for another whole year. And the extra year we spent on H2, I think, was worth the investment because that turned out to be like the perfect storm of a game for everybody.
Do you feel like it's Ensemble's best game?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, people argue about it, but I know there's a lot of people who feel Age of Mythology was their favorite. There's something about that game that really triggered a lot of interest.
Yeah.
I like the period of Age 3 better than any period, I think, personally. But they all have their strengths and weaknesses of it. But I think Age 2 is the best game we ever built.
Yeah. Do you feel like it's important for the Age of Empires series? Was it ever discussed, or was it just a coincidence that you're always advancing through the eras? Do you feel like that's a core staple of the series? Do you constantly want it to move forward like that?
Well, we left it open as an option because the original idea for H1 might have been all of civilization, but then we said this is crazy. Let's just do ancient times, and if we do it, we can manage. It's manageable, and if it succeeds, then we can go forward in time. And H2 made that really an obvious success. And then we struggled over what H3 would be because you're starting to get into ranged weapons, which you could fire at something not on the screen or something like that.
Yeah.
So we weren't sure what to do with that one. We struggled with that, and then we never really we talked about a possibility of an H4. What would that be? But we never really there was never no work was ever done on it.
And what were those discussions like? What were you guys thinking?
How would we manage modern warfare? How would we manage modern warfare in a scale?
So it would have been World War II?
I'm not sure. It could have been like the Civil War, American Civil War era, or World War I or something. I don't know. We hadn't really done any work. Usually when we started thinking about stuff like that, we were up to our eyeballs in the work we had to get done for the game in hand. We tried to do many other projects, and we always ate them up, chewed them up, just to get the people back on the Age game. That was the next thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty wild that you guys didn't get around to Age of Empires 4. It seems like that was the main game series you guys had at that point. Why do you think you kind of left it alone after Age 3?
Well, Microsoft let us all go.
Right.
That was part of it. I mean, there was management change at Microsoft, and some new people came in, people we didn't have any relationship with, had not been through the hard times, had not, there were years when I think our games funded the whole Microsoft game group. They were so successful, and people came in who didn't have that history, and they were looking to the future, not the past. And I think the future for them was Xbox, and they saw us as a PC game developer. They thought that PC games were not the future. So we did build an Xbox game for them. We built Halo Wars.
Yeah.
And we had started on an MMOR. We're going to build a Halo Wars role-playing game.
That's right.
Massive multiplayer game, like to compete with Blizzard. And we worked on that, and the management at the time liked it, and we were going ahead with that. And H4 was there, but we thought we'd take a break from it. The idea, let's get these underway and see how they do, and then we can go back to H4 if it's still viable. But there was a management change, and the new manager decided we weren't the future, and we were too expensive to operate, and he just closed us up and let us all go.
God, how far did you guys get with that Halo MMO?
It was playable. We were playing it for sure, and it was like recognizable. You'd know what you were looking at for sure. You'd know you could get it, and it was a big work. It was a lot of work to be done yet, but we had gone through several milestones with it, and then it was canceled.
Was that a heartbreaker?
It was for the team, I'm pretty sure, because they had invested a lot in it, and they were really excited about it. I mean, the whole thing was a heartbreaker to have the whole company go away. We built a great group. I mean, I have a photograph from around 1996 or 97 where there's like 16 people, which is Ensemble Studios in that time, and that's taken in 1996 or 97. Now in 2009, they let us all go, and I think 12 or 13 of those original 16 people are still with the company. We had a real group that stayed together, and we'd done some wonderful things, and we had a great atmosphere at the company, and we thought we'd be working for Microsoft for the rest of our lives.
I mean, what was it like to have like those early days of Halo Wars, I guess, where Microsoft had a big hit with the original Xbox? So was there a certain amount of like PC pride amongst Ensemble of like, we don't want to work with this console license Halo, like don't make us do this, Microsoft?
Well, I mean, it was an interesting challenge. How do you take RTS and take it to the Xbox?
Yeah.
So from a challenge, intellectual challenge, that was cool to a lot of people. I know one of our programmers, Tim Dean, he went through and reprogrammed, I think Star Wars, or no, it's one of the games out there, maybe Age of Mythology, and program it to use an Xbox controller. So you could, he fixed it so you could play we had to prove that we could do it. So he went through and figured out how to make everything work in Age of Mythology using the Xbox controller. So we felt, okay, let's see if we can make a game, can strategy transmit over to the Xbox. So it was an intellectual challenge, and I don't think we had a problem working with the Halo franchise, as I recall.
Was it always Halo?
Well, Microsoft wanted that. I mean,
Yeah.
They decided to close us down way before we were finished that project, but it gave us a big incentive to stay and finish it.
Wait a minute. So how does that work? So when were you working on the MMO then?
We were working on the MMO in like 2008, 2009.
So like the same era as Halo Wars?
Yeah. So at the same time, they said, we want you to finish Halo Wars. We're going to stop working on the MMO, and we're going to incent you to finish Halo Wars for us. And so basically, the people working on Halo Wars the MMO moved over to work on Halo Wars. We put the whole team on it. Everybody who wanted to stay. I mean, some people left and went off and started their own companies. And the rest of us stayed and finished Halo Wars, and then we went on to something new.
Man, do you remember the setting for the MMO? Do you remember any details about how that game worked, where it fit in Halo lore?
I don't.
Okay.
I wasn't really on the project, and I wasn't really on any of the projects by then. I was more like a manager or a consultant or a PR person.
Yeah.
I wasn't involved in the design of any of those games.
Sure. What was the strangest project that never came to be within Ensemble? Were there some oddball ideas that were spitballed around at some point there?
Well, I don't think any of them were crazy. I think actually when we started the company, actually there was a tank game we had just built as a test, and all it was the programming team had built the ability to drive tanks around on a screen and shoot at each other, and that would never really did anything more than just a concept of how to move things on a screen. And then we built I don't remember. I remember there were several games. I just don't remember offhand. I still have documents for some of them. There's a magic game, spell casting, magic stuff going on.
Not like a licensed magic game, but just a
No,
sorcery
no,
game.
it was our
Okay.
own product. I don't even remember the name of it. There was an underwater game we built.
What?
It was going on. It was like it was a strategy game set underwater. Like explore the oceans and stuff.
An RTS strategy game?
Yeah.
Or sorry, an RTS underwater game?
Something like that, yeah.
Huh, but it wasn't
I
connected.
have a screenshot of a guy looking out, like the captain looking out of the Nautilus, kind of like at this big round window looking out into the ocean.
That'd be awesome. Was it connected to Age at all? Would you ever plan any other Age
And it wasn't
spin-offs?
part of Age at all. It was something completely different.
Okay. Awesome.
So it was like we're gamers. We have ideas, and you work on a project for a couple of years. We felt we needed to let people have some freedom to putz around. So we would occasionally say, okay, go build something for a couple of months and see if we can turn it into something great. And none of those things ever got past significant milestone. Either Microsoft didn't want to publish it, or we didn't get past our management team. But
yeah. Well, what advice would you have for Relic and the guys over there making Age of Empires 4? Is that exciting for you to see? Does it feel like someone else dating your old lady?
I'm excited. I think that it's cool that the Age of Empires is going to continue to live. I mean, I've worked on a couple of games that seem to be evergreen, and I'm happy that Age will be continuing on. I'm behind. I mean, I'm past Age of Empires. I mean, it was a wonderful experience. I moved on. I hope they do something clever and fun with it, and they have a great time making it. I'd be interested to see what they do with it. I hope that they make it their own game and have as much fun building something as we did. I mean, I think there's some core ideas about what makes an Age game. I'll let them figure it out. We'll let them figure out if they can understand it, what they think is an Age game. I think there's a strong community of players out there who have a lot of ideas about what an Age game should be. I'm sure they're very vocal on their fan sites and stuff like that. So I'm excited that somebody's going to do it. I'm happy that it's not me. I've moved on to something else.
I'm sure.
I'm pretty close to being retired, actually. I don't even play games so much anymore.
What?
If it's not something I work on, I don't play much. It seems like as you get older, playing a game for hours seems like a time. There's something I'd rather be doing while my time seems shorter.
Bruce, you can't turn your back on games now, man.
Well, I haven't. I play a lot of games, let me tell you, but usually it's stuff I'm working on or something that's comparable to what we're working on. We're looking for ideas or, it's a competitive analysis. What are the competitors doing? So what can we borrow from them, or how do we beat them, or what do we do?
Always a businessman. Thinking about like Relic, I mean, it's their first Age of Empires game, I'm guessing they are going to want to be as conservative as possible, and that would lead them to go like, well, let's go back to Age of Empires 1, Age of Empires 2 time frame. Would you feel like that's a mistake for them to go backwards in time? Do you want them to keep going forward in time?
Well, my thought is that they built their reputation building World War II games.
Yeah.
And I'd love to see what they do with the World War II. I mean, I've read a lot of World War II history. I like military history as a young person. And I've been to Europe and visited battlefields. I mean, I'd love to see them do something really cool with it. That would be cool for me. I think it'd be a mistake to go back and do Age 1. I mean, that's been done. I would think that they'd be better off doing something completely fresh.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what are you looking forward to in your development history? You're doing a lot of research amongst competitors, but Hero Academy 2 is coming soon, right?
Hero Academy should be a worldwide launch in a couple of months, and It's been a lot of fun to work on that. And then the next game, like I said, uh, is uh, is going to be a departure from anything we've done before, and I think it's going to be really widely well received. I'm really anxious to see what people think of that. And we've got another prototype we're building. It's just a speculative thing.
Yeah.
My little studio. I mean, I'm only a part timer, more of a consultant. It started by three guys who worked at Ensemble. I volunteered to work with them for free, and they wouldn't let me do that. They insisted on paying me something, and our little studio's gone from 15 people to up to 30 now, and I don't think we want to get much bigger, but we keep getting these interesting projects. So I'm happy to be engaged and still making games.
It's interesting. You talk about, tight-knit family within Ensemble, and even after Ensemble crumbled, everybody still seems connected. I mean, Robot has a lot of former Ensemble dev talent. They made Hero Academy 1, and they hand the sequel to you guys, which is like the cousin studio, right?
Yep. Yeah, we're all, two of the founders of Bonus XP worked at Robot, and one of them worked on Hero Academy 1.
Oh, okay.
So we're friends. I mean, we're absolutely friends. I mean, it's good to go over there and visit. There's still a core of people over there that we all work together, and there's at least several. There's 2 or 3 other studios in the Dallas area that are Ensemble guys, people. So it's one of these seed companies. I mean, Dallas was already a seed area, but there's a lot of game development in Dallas. It's probably the 3rd or 4th biggest game development city in North America.
Yeah.
City.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you talk about the secret project. What games are you playing in the competition area to help inform that secret project? Color the area outside the lines for us, please.
Yeah. Legend of Zelda.
Interesting. Breath of the Wild specifically?
I won't say any more than that, but if you could, it's like an 80s game.
Okay. Huh. That's going to be exciting for you. Awesome. Well, hey, anything else you want to say? Anything else you want to get off your chest reflecting on your entire career, sir?
No, I'd say I've been lucky. I was a game player who decided to try to make games before he found a real job, and almost 40 years have gone by and I never found that real job. I mean, but I have worked for like 10 or 15 different companies. It's not for the faint-hearted. Companies come and go and things blow up, and even when you're successful, there's no guarantees. But there's a story about if you enjoy what you do for a living, you never work a day in your life, and that's been generally true for me. I mean, there's been days when we had to work for sure, but I've been very lucky with the opportunities that came my way.
Awesome. Well, thank you for all of your hard work throughout the years. I really, really loved your work at Ensemble, and I'm really looking forward to Hero Academy 2.
Okay, thanks for the call.
Thank you so much for watching this excerpt from the Game Informer Show podcast. You can subscribe to the audio version and listen to new episodes airing every Thursday. We cover big games on the horizon, games that we've just reviewed. We have long-form developer interviews, a lot of fun stuff. So check it out every Thursday.